We talk about a few subjects that you might not agree with, but I want you to look at the whole picture and not get caught up in the small things. George mentions aliens and religion, for instance. Hi everyone, welcome back to Sheep Farm, and this is the second in the series of 3 podcasts with Jerry Marzinsky, and today we're joined by George Jagatic, who, like Jerry, is an experienced psychotherapist, but George also hears psychotic voices. This is a must listen to anybody who is going through, or has family or friends going through this type of phenomenon. This subject takes on a deeper significance when we look at what is actually happening in the world today. Who is really controlling the minds of leaders and the gullible population as a whole? We talk about a few subjects that you might not agree with, but I want you to look at the whole picture and not get caught up in the small things. But there is another layer to our existence, the controlling energy, driving human behaviour in some way. What voices are real, and they're a real phenomenon. And everybody has them at some level. Jerry has been working with George for over a year now, and he is now fully functional and holding down a full-time job, something that he couldn't do prior. It turns out that these voices are not hallucinations. They run well-defined, repeatable patterns which flies in the face of psychiatric's proclamation that they are hallucinations. It is these voices which drive paranoid schizophrenia. If the voices can be gotten rid of, by any means, all symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia vanish with them.
George is, he's a gem, man. Very seldom do anybody who's had to deal with the voices, except for Sherry Sweeney, have the guts to get up there and talk about them. They put this label on them like, oh yeah, you're schizophrenic, you're crazy, you got nothing to say. And they do that even though they don't know what the devil's going on. They have no idea what causes schizophrenia. They have no idea what to do about it. They're drugging these guys senseless. They're causing massive damage to their peripheral nervous systems and their brains. And then they're blaming it on the schizophrenia. And the rat scientists are coming and going, no, when we give these neuroleptic drugs to rats, their brains are shrunk too, and so are their nervous systems. So you can't say that. And then they're finding it in the autopsies of schizophrenics. Their brains and their nervous systems are destroyed permanently. And the longer they're on these drugs, the more damage is being done. And they're blocking papers from being published. They're thwarting papers. They're changing the content of papers. They've even manipulated NIMH to say, oh yeah, schizophrenia isn't a problem. It went from, 2 or 3 million in the United States. They manipulated the statistics when they got criticized for not providing enough research money. They cut it down to like 117,000. I got the exact figure somewhere. But they manipulated. They said, oh, schizophrenia isn't a big problem. It's one of the number 10 problems on the planet. It's up there with Alzheimer's and everything else. But the research money that they're spending to find a solution is virtually nothing. It's looking to me like they don't want a solution. Selling these toxic drugs to do a chemical lobotomy on the patient's brain. They're major tranquilizers. And that's the only reason they work, is because they calm the people down. They stun them.
When I started hearing it, as I said before, I thought to myself, I've got some hallucinations going on. I've got some internal structures that are kind of bubbling to the surface. This is me. I'm creating this world. This is kind of cool. And that's initially what I thought. Even though what I was hearing was things that I would never say, or things that were shocking, or things that were funny. And I say shocking or funny because generally, if something is funny, it hits you in an unexpected way. It's like a surprise. And those surprises are kind of difficult to create internally. And so I would hear the things that were funny or things that were shocking, and I would go, wow, that's amazing that something internal could actually surprise me and shock me, like that. So that was kind of like, oh, this is what's going on here. There's something bigger happening. Well, what Jerry wanted me to tell you was the moment that I realized this was ego dystonic. And what happened was I was having problems with my computer. I would try to get online, or I would try to go to certain web pages, and the computer would malfunction, or it just seemed like there was a connection with the voices in the computer. And I thought I'm being paranoid. But what I want to do is I want to make sure I want to create a net around the computer, make sure I don't know what the password is for the Wi-Fi. Get somebody to come over and change it. I don't want to know what it is. And then maybe if I don't know what the password is, maybe the voices can't get in. And then I'll test the computer and see if it works. I mean, it seemed pretty logical to me. But so I had somebody come over to change the password. They were in one end of the apartment. I was on the other. In fact, I was in the bathroom washing my hands. I didn't want to know what the password was going to be. Did not want to know. And I didn't want to know anything about it. Well, as I'm washing my hands in the bathroom, trying to stay away from the whole situation of what was going on in the other side of the house, one voice said to another voice in my head, he's changing the password to password. Now, this was new information. And not only was this new information, this was information I did not want to know. But I realized at that moment that this was information that was external to everything that was going on internally in my mind. So I immediately go out to my friend and I said, are you changing the password to password? And he's, looking down at his keyboard, typing away. And he looked up at me shocked. And he said, yeah, how did you know? And,
See, now, I've run into that many times, we at the end of our last interview, we almost had time to talk about the guy the marijuana guy who was hearing voices, and they drove him up to Oregon, yeah. Well, not just the shadow people. This was a guy who the voices said, hey, we know where there's a pot field up in marijuana, I don't think I told that, but what we're trying to say is that these things they know things that the individual does not.
And doesn't even.
Yeah, they seem to have some kind of purpose, don't they? There's definitely a purpose behind it. Whether we or you guys know what that real purpose is another question, isn't it? But
the real purpose is they feed off of the negative emotional energy that they generate with the garbage that they put in people's heads.
Yeah, the negative feed, the Monsters Inc. Paradox.
Exactly.
Where they're drawing energy out of people and utilizing it somewhere else. Probably.
Well, Dom, it was real clear for me when the voices initially did not leave. They were actually kind of being nice to me. They were building a relationship. They were playing with me. They were, we had some camaraderie. But
the ultimate salesman.
Well, exactly. In retrospect, for me, it was clear it was all about buy-in because they wanted that connection there for as long as they could. And then what happened, what I realized what was going on was when I realized that they wanted control. Then it took a very dark turn, and they said, okay, you can't do this. You have to ask us for permission. You have to do it this way. And it was this absolute desire for control that really began the shift into a very different relationship that I have with the voices, which is much more combative, much more about self-preservation, self-protection, and keeping the voices away from anything I'm experiencing internally. And my point there is that they want control. They wanted somebody who they could make do things or get to buy into their belief system, so that.
Sounds like a cult leader.
Yeah, well, exactly.
You're like a cult leader, drags you in with all these promises.
Yeah, exactly.
And then starts to order you around and tell you what you've got to do. Well, you can't.
Right.
But the end result is to get you in trouble, to generate that negative emotional energy that they feed off of.
Dragging you in, telling you everything you can have, and then slowly controlling you until you don't know where you are and you're stuck there.
Yeah.
Right?
Very first thing when they said, we're the voice of God,